Hey guys, tonight we wander down the warm coast of East Africa, where the air smells of salt, cloves, and the faint smoke of evening cooking fires. You stand before a city built not from grey stone blocks hauled from cold quarries, but from coral itself, pulled up from reefs and shaped into walls that shimmer pale in moonlight. The sound of waves nudges the shoreline, and somewhere nearby, a rooster is still confused about whether it's day or night. You're stepping into a world where merchants greet one another in Swahili, Arabic, Persian, and more, and well, you're just here to relax. The truth is, you probably wouldn't survive a single day of their diets, their humidity, or their long walks in sandals across blazing courtyards. But don't worry, tonight you get the fun version. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're awake enough, tell me in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is right now. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The coral walls rise taller the closer you get. You run your hand over their surface, rough, porous, not the marble-polished stone of European castles, but something that once held schools of fish. The builders stacked it in blocks, binding them with lime mortar. Some of these walls have stood for centuries, though in the humidity, you wonder how. Historians still argue whether imported masons introduced the techniques, or whether local hands refined coral into its best form. Either way, you're grateful for the texture, because it feels cool even in the sticky night. As you walk further, the moon glances off carved niches, and you imagine how much effort it took to quarry coral. Fishermen by day, builders by afternoon, the same hands that cast nets also cut reefs. A quirky tidbit: some accounts claim that the sharp edges of newly cut coral doubled as makeshift nail files for workers. You pause, flexing your fingers, considering how stylishly manicured a medieval mason might have been. The street you step onto isn't broad, it snakes and narrows, guiding you into the heart of the town. A donkey lumbers past, carrying water jars, each clay vessel clinking like sleepy bells. The handler murmurs a Swahili lullaby, a reminder that music here doesn't need an instrument. Overhead, wooden balconies jut out, leaning so close you feel they might kiss. Their shadows make the lane darker, and you smell laundry drying above cotton infused with ocean breeze. You glance down and catch a crab scuttling from one wall gap to another. Even the crabs are locals here, permanent tenants of coral cities. Factually, this is Kilwa, or maybe Mombasa, or perhaps one of the smaller coral stone towns. Like Geddy, historians debate how interconnected these settlements truly were. But for you, wandering now, they are one continuous city, dreamlike, where mosques and palaces rise from the same reef bones. You come to a gateway, an archway cut so precisely into the coral that the stones resemble lace. A carved inscription curls across its top in Arabic script, a fragment of a verse blessing those who enter. You trace it with your eyes, though your lips fumble over pronunciation. You wonder how many hands, how many centuries, have touched that same stone. Inside, the courtyard opens wide. Palm trees rise from sand-packed soil. A fountain murmurs at the center, though the water is brackish, more decorative than refreshing. You imagine residents once gathered here at dusk, sipping coconut water, fanning themselves against mosquitoes. They would share gossip about monsoon winds and trading ships, while you, standing in the same air centuries later, feel only the slow pull of history, as though the walls themselves exhale. A bat swoops overhead. It dips, then vanishes into a crack in the coral tower. Maybe it carries a date fruit half chewed, maybe it's simply lost. You chuckle, because it feels like even the bats here are traders. The deeper into the town you walk, the more layers appear. Carved wooden doors, stuccoed walls painted once in ochre but now fading, tiny alcoves holding oil lamps long gone cold. A sleepy cat sprawls on a threshold, its belly rising with the steady rhythm of a tide. You envy it an expert in rest, no need for history lectures. You stop again. The coral is warm now beneath your fingers, storing up the day's Sunday. It almost hums, and you realize you're holding a fossilized reef, turned house, turned ruin. The sea has always been here, always giving fish, salt, shells, coral, until humans rearranged it into their own architecture. That's the magic and the humor of these towns. They're marine cities pretending to be terrestrial, and you, a land-based guest, are wandering inside an old ocean skeleton, and as your footsteps echo softer with each pause, you feel the rhythm of the city not in its noise but in its stillness, waiting for you to drift a little closer to sleep. You shuffle forward from the courtyard, following the faint glow of oil lamps still clinging to life along the narrow lanes. Soon, the street widens into a market square, and suddenly the air changes. It's thicker, spiced, busy, even though the night is well underway. You wander between woven mats where merchants have laid out their goods, ivory bangles gleaming like pale moons, baskets of dried fish stiff as driftwood, and heaps of cloves so pungent they almost tingle in your nostrils. Somewhere, a child coughs politely from the pepper dust. This is the hum of the Swahili market, a place where the world folds in on itself. You hear voices slipping between Arabic greetings, Bantu rhythms, and the sing-song lilt of sailors who've just disembarked from their dhows. A Persian trader brags about the quality of his turquoise beads. Beside him, a local fisherman insists his sea cucumbers are not only edible but practically medicinal. Historians still argue whether those claims were clever marketing or genuine belief, but either way, someone's buying them with a skeptical grin. A quirky tidbit: you notice bundles of cowrie shells strung together like jewelry. These aren't souvenirs, they're currency. Imagine walking into your grocery store today and trying to pay for bread with seashells. It might not work at the checkout counter, but here, a careful count of shells could buy you a bolt of imported cloth or a week's worth of smoked shark. You pick one up, roll it between your fingers, and wonder whether the cashier would give you side-eye. Probably. As you linger, the smell of roasting nuts drifts closer. A woman stirs a pan with practiced ease, her bracelets jingling louder than the spoon. She offers you a taste: slightly charred cashews glazed with honey. You nod, grateful, though you know your modern dentist would not approve. Still, this is how the market works. Not just transactions, but hospitality. Gestures that blur the line between stranger and guest. To your left, a merchant unfurls a length of cloth dyed in indigo so deep it feels like midnight. He waves it, letting it shimmer under the lamplight, and you almost laugh because it looks suspiciously like the shirt you saw at a modern department store, minus the Made in China tag. Here, though, indigo is prestige. People would wear it proudly to festivals or prayers. Across the square, someone pounds grain with a wooden mortar. The thump-thump rhythm joins the chatter, creating a kind of percussive lullaby. You start to sway without realizing it. A donkey brays in the distance, as if auditioning for the percussion section, and just like that, the whole market has become a sleepy orchestra. One historical fact: markets like these weren't casual pop-ups. They were crucial nodes in the Indian Ocean trade network, stretching from Sofala to Gujarat, Aden to Canton. Spices, porcelain, and gold passed through here, stitched into global webs, long before anyone in Europe could spell globalization. And yet, as lively as it is tonight, you notice the pace is not frantic. Merchants sit cross-legged, patient, almost meditative, as if they know monsoon winds will keep business steady. You duck into a stall where incense coils smoulder in clay dishes. Frankincense smoke curls upward, softening the harshness of the salty air. The merchant claims it keeps away mosquitoes. You test the idea by swatting one anyway. Historians still debate whether incense truly deterred pests, or just made everyone smell mysteriously holy. But either way, you appreciate the perfume. Nearby, a storyteller clears his throat, gathering a ring of children. You pause to listen. His tale meanders from a shark that turned into a man to a sultan's daughter who outsmarted a greedy jinn. The kids giggle at the punchline, something about the shark man being a terrible swimmer even with legs. You chuckle too, because humor, it turns out, survives centuries intact. A soft breeze threads through the square, carrying with it the clatter of beads, the slap of sandals, and the laughter of bargain seekers. You tilt your head back and watch the stars. Somewhere above this marketplace, the same constellations are steering ships toward the harbour. Down here, the stars steer conversations toward haggling and gossip. Someone behind you whispers that the Sultan's new robe was sewn crooked, and you bite your tongue to keep from laughing aloud. Medieval fashion faux pas were clearly as dramatic as modern ones, and so you keep moving, drifting between mats, baskets, and voices. Every exchange, every smell, every little quirk of the market seeps into you until it feels less like shopping and more like breathing, a place where commerce becomes comfort, and comfort becomes a gentle rhythm you can carry with you into sleep. You slip out of the market, your pockets metaphorically full of shells and stories, and wander into a narrow lane where the bustle fades. Here, the city quiets into a maze of carved doors and winding alleys. The coral walls on either side lean toward each other, and the path is just wide enough for two people to pass shoulder to shoulder, assuming neither of you is carrying a goat. Your eyes are drawn instantly to the doors. Each one is a wooden masterpiece, heavy planks bound with brass studs and framed by intricate carvings that spiral into floral patterns or geometric whorls. You run your fingers across one, the grooves cool and surprisingly deep. The grain of the mangrove wood tells its own story, traveling from the swamp to the craftsman's chisel to this sleepy doorway. Mainstream fact here: these doors are some of the earliest and most recognizable architectural signatures of the Swahili coast, often inscribed with Quranic verses or talismanic symbols to guard the home. You pause to notice one particularly unusual carving: a fish swallowing a smaller fish, a quirky tidbit. Some scholars think this might be an inside joke, a carpenter's playful commentary on trade hierarchies. After all, small fish and big fish alike swam through this economy, though only one got eaten. You chuckle, thinking how graffiti hasn't changed all that much. Today it's Sharpie tags on subway walls. Back then, it was fish jokes in cedar. The alleys themselves feel like veins through coral flesh. Light barely filters down, so you rely on the glow of lamps poking out from recessed niches. The walls are porous, breathing, almost damp, and when you press your ear against one, you think you can hear the faint rush of the ocean inside. Historians still argue whether these alleys were designed deliberately for airflow and shade, or whether they simply reflect the organic sprawl of the settlement. Either way, you're grateful for the cooler air brushing your face. A cat slips past, tail high, brushing your calf as if you're the intruder here. You hear faint laughter echoing from within a courtyard, and you catch a glimpse through a carved lattice window, a family eating by lamplight, their hands dipping into a shared bowl of spiced rice. The scent drifts out, mingled with wood smoke, making your stomach growl. You press on, feeling a little like a burglar stealing smells. Further along, the path suddenly kinks, then narrows again, and you're certain you've circled back, but the doors are never the same. Each one tells a different story. A door with Indian-style brass knobs, one with an Arabic inscription at the lintel, another with vines curling up the panels as though wood itself tried to grow. You reach out and knock lightly on one, just to hear the hollow thud. Somewhere inside, a child answers with a sleepy giggle before vanishing into silence again. You imagine arriving here as a foreign visitor centuries ago, bewildered but enchanted, weaving through these lanes with a guide. You would have been dazzled not only by the craftsmanship but also by the sense of secrecy. Every twist hides a surprise, every doorway a private world. Even today, your wandering feels dreamlike, as though the alleys are shifting with your steps, closing behind you like the folds of a book. A small shrine appears tucked into the corner of an alley, coral stones stacked into a niche, decorated with seashells and a scrap of cloth. Someone has left an offering, maybe fruit, maybe flowers. The place smells faintly of incense. You bow your head out of instinct, unsure whether to call it superstition or devotion. Historians still debate how deeply Islamic practices blended with older coastal beliefs here, but the coexistence is carved into the very alleys you walk. Turning another corner, you almost collide with a donkey, pulling a cart of firewood. The driver grins at you, mutters a greeting you can't quite parse, and guides the animal down another shadowed lane. You laugh softly, because in this labyrinth, even the donkeys seem to know the way better than you. Finally, you pause before the grandest door you've seen yet, massive, studded with iron, carved into a frame of interlocking stars. You lean your forehead gently against it, feeling the cool reassurance of history pressed back. Behind it lies another courtyard, another family, another layer of the coral stone city's life. But for now, you're content with the texture, the silence, the faint memory of hands that carved it centuries ago. And as you step back, you realize the alleys have done their work. They've slowed you, hushed you, folded you into the rhythm of a place where every turn hides beauty, and every door whispers a story to lull you deeper towards sleep. You drift out of the alleys, guided not by a map, but by the low call echoing across the town. It's not a rooster this time, though you wouldn't be surprised. It's the muezzin's voice, rising and falling with calm assurance, winding its way through coral walls and palm fronds. You follow the sound, your feet scuffing softly against packed sand, until you arrive at a mosque bathed in the pale wash of moonlight. The building is modest in height, but striking in texture. Coral blocks smoothed with lime plaster gleam like ivory under the stars. You tilt your head upward and catch the curve of a dome, subtle and almost shy, as though it doesn't want to brag about existing. A minaret rises, not soaring like Ottoman towers, but sturdy, square, and practical. A lamp burns at its base, and the scent of oil mingles with the faint tang of seaweed carried on the breeze. Fact, many of these mosques were built without timber roofs, relying instead on coral domes and barrel vaults, ingenious solutions in a region where hardwoods were precious imports. You run your hand along the wall and imagine masons setting each stone while reciting prayers, hoping the structure would endure storms both literal and political. You step closer, careful not to clatter, and peer through an arched doorway. Inside, a prayer hall stretches out, its floor smoothed by centuries of bare feet. The mihrab, a niche pointing toward Mecca, is simple yet elegant, carved with geometric lines that catch the flicker of a lantern. Someone has left a woven mat rolled in the corner, and you can almost hear the whisper of knees brushing fabric. A quirky tidbit floats into your mind. In some Swahili towns, mosque walls were occasionally embedded with shards of Chinese porcelain, not as tableware but as decoration. Imagine walking into a sacred space and spotting blue and white bowls winking from the plaster like seashells trapped in stone. You chuckle, thinking of it as medieval interior design, half prayer, half pottery show. The air inside is cooler, almost hushed by the coral's breath. You take a step, and your footfall echoes, multiplying itself into a soft chorus. You pause, letting the silence swallow you again. Somewhere in the back, a gecko chirps, then scampers across the wall. It pauses above the mihrab, as if claiming the best seat in the house. Historians still argue whether these mosques were primarily community hubs or strictly sacred spaces. Judging by the faint traces of laughter you hear outside, you suspect both. Perhaps lessons were taught here, debates sparked, news shared then, when the call came, voices lowered, and people bowed together. You can almost see it. A fisherman, a merchant, a child all shoulder to shoulder, leaving worldly concerns outside like sandals. You slip back into the courtyard, where palm shadows stretch across the packed earth. A well sits in the corner, its rope damp, its bucket resting lazily on the lip. You imagine worshippers washing their hands and faces here before prayers, the water cool against skin already sticky from humidity. You try it yourself, dipping a hand into the bucket, and find the water faintly brackish but refreshing. You smile, your modern stomach would probably regret it later, but your imagination is safe enough. The muezzin's voice drifts again, softer now, like an echo travelling across centuries. It weaves into the crash of distant waves, into the quiet sigh of wind through palms, into the faint thud of your own heartbeat. You realize that here, faith is less about spectacle and more about rhythm, a daily cadence that folds into the town like tides. You lean back against the coral wall, closing your eyes for a moment. Behind your eyelids, you see domes glowing in moonlight, hear the shuffle of feet across sand, feel the tug of community bound together by prayer. You breathe in, slow and steady, and when you exhale, it feels as though the mosque itself sighs with you, its stones exhaling the warmth of centuries. And when you finally step away, the call still lingers in your ears, not loud, not insistent, but gentle, like a lullaby meant to guide, not just the faithful but anyone wandering under the same stars toward peace, and maybe toward sleep. The call to prayer fades, but the night is not done with its music. You follow the faint creak of wood and the slap of water against hulls until the alleys open to a shoreline. Before you stretches the harbour, where dhows, slender, graceful sailing vessels rest at anchor, their lateen sails folded like sleepy wings. Moonlight shimmers across the water, turning every ripple into a silver thread, and you feel as if you've stumbled into a living painting. You walk closer, your sandals sinking slightly into damp sand. Fishermen are still at work despite the hour, patching nets by lantern glow. One hums a tune that could just as easily be a prayer as a sea shanty. The air is rich with salt and the tang of drying seaweed, and your lungs sting with freshness you wish you could bottle. Mainstream fact: the Indian Ocean trade depended on these very dhows, their triangular sails perfectly designed to harness the predictable monsoon winds, carrying spices, ivory, and textiles across thousands of miles. You crouch to watch as one sailor sharpens a wooden peg, tapping it into the hull with a rhythm so steady it feels like a heartbeat. A quirky tidbit surfaces. Some chroniclers claim that the resin used to waterproof dhow planks was mixed with shark oil. Imagine the conversations. Ah yes, seaworthy thanks to the finest shark goo. You smirk, wondering whether it was a maritime tradition or a clever excuse for a particularly fishy smell. The harbour is not silent. Crates are shifted with grunts, goats bleat impatiently from a boat being loaded, and somewhere an irritated parrot squawks at being woken. A donkey brays from the road, as if auditioning again for tonight's soundscape. You half expect someone to hand you a tambourine and invite you into the orchestra of noises. A small group of sailors huddles near a fire, their faces orange in the flicker. They pass around a bowl of roasted chickpeas, cracking jokes in a mixture of Swahili and Arabic. You catch fragments, teasing someone about forgetting the tides, another about getting seasick even on land. Laughter bursts, echoing over the water like gulls. Historians still argue whether most sailors were permanent residents of these towns or seasonal migrants riding the winds. But here, in the glow of the fire, it hardly matters they belong to the sea first. You step onto the wooden planks of a jetty. They creak under your weight, threatening but never breaking. The water below laps softly, glowing faintly with bioluminescence, tiny sparks winking as if the stars had spilled into the sea. You lean over the edge, hypnotized, until a crab scuttles past your foot and reminds you not to fall in. Further along, a dhow prepares to depart even at this late hour. Its crew hoists the sail, and the fabric catches the breeze like the wing of a giant bird. The vessel drifts away silently, the triangular sail a shadow against the moonlit horizon. You breathe slower, following its glide until it blurs with the night. You think of how many journeys began exactly this way. Silk bound for Arabia, porcelain bound for Africa, stories bound for anywhere a tide would carry them. One sailor waves at you from another deck. You wave back, though you're fairly certain you'd last 5 minutes at sea before demanding to be set ashore. You laugh under your breath. Sea legs were clearly not in your genetic package. Still, in this moment, you feel folded into the rhythm of maritime life. You sit on a coil of rope, the fibers rough against your palms, and watch the harbour doze. The waves hush against the coral piers, the lanterns bob, and the sails sway with the night breeze. The whole scene seems to rock you gently, like the deck of a ship, except here you're safe from seasickness. The dhows become lullabies, their sails like blankets stretched against the sky. And as you finally stand, brushing sand from your feet, you realize that these vessels, fragile, creaking, patched with shark goo and sailor jokes, were the threads stitching continents together. You walk back toward the town, the sound of the sea fading behind you, carrying its rhythm in your bones like a song designed to lull you toward sleep. You wander back into the town, the harbour's salt still clinging to your lips, when your nose catches something even more persuasive. Spices. The scent coils through the narrow alleys like invisible smoke, sweet, sharp, and teasing. You follow your instincts, like a cartoon character, drifting after a pie on a windowsill, until you find yourself before a stall lit by a single oil lamp. Here, A woman stirs a pot so large it could double as a small bathtub. The steam rising from it is dizzying cinnamon, cloves, and cardamom, mingled with coconut milk so thick it coats the air. She ladles a taste into a wooden spoon, and with a mischievous smile, she offers it to you. You take it, of course, because who turns down hospitality in the middle of a medieval Swahili town? The flavor bursts across your tongue, sweet, earthy, a little smoky. You hum approval, trying not to look like you've just fallen in love with rice. Mainstream fact: dishes along the Swahili coast often blended African staples with Indian and Arab flavors. Coconut, rice, and spices were staples of this fusion, long before fusion cuisine became a trendy phrase. The food itself is proof of centuries of mingling across the Indian Ocean. As you walk, you notice men crouched over mortars, pounding cashews into paste. One sprinkles in chili powder, another squeezes in lime juice. A quirky tidbit: some travelers once wrote that people here believed limes could ward off evil airs from the sea. Whether it kept away spirits or just added tang to your curry, well, historians still argue. You lick your lips, silently voting for tang. The street grows livelier as you turn a corner. Clay ovens glow, and the smell of flatbread chapati, soft and buttery, fills the night. You watch as dough is rolled thin, slapped onto the hot surface, then flipped with a flick of the wrist so fast it's almost a magic trick. A boy nearby sells roasted bananas, their skins blackened, the insides golden and sweet. He hands you one wrapped in palm leaf. You take a bite, warm, caramelized, sticky. If dessert could hum you to sleep, this would be it. You pause at another stall where skewers of fish sizzle over glowing coals. The cook sprinkles sea salt and rubs them with turmeric. Smoke curls upward, carrying with it the chatter of satisfied customers. Someone jokes that even the cats here know good cuisine. They line up along the edges, eyes fixed, tails twitching. One cat mews pitifully, and the cook tosses it a fish head. You laugh softly. Apparently, even medieval cats ate better than you on some nights. A group of travelers sits on woven mats nearby, sharing bowls of pilau rice. They wave you over, and you settle in among them. The rice is spiced with cinnamon and cloves, studded with raisins, and you wonder why raisins get such a bad reputation in modern trail mix. Here, they're tiny bursts of sweetness against savory grains. A man explains proudly that the recipe is older than any of them, passed from grandmother to grandmother. His companion adds, with a wink, that it probably tastes better now that his wife is the one cooking. Everyone laughs, except the wife, who swats his arm affectionately. You stretch out your legs, full and drowsy. Around you, the street hums with the intimacy of shared meals, clay bowls clinking, soft chatter, the occasional burst of laughter. You realize that food here isn't just sustenance. It's social glue, diplomacy, even a little theatre. Each flavor carries a passport stamp from somewhere else, proof that the ocean's trade winds blew straight into the cooking pot. Historians still debate how much of this cuisine originated locally versus how much was imported from Arabia, India, or Persia. But as you lick the last of the coconut sauce from your fingers, you can't help thinking, why argue? The beauty is in the mix. Finally, you lean back against the coral wall, eyelids heavy, the aromas wrapping you like a blanket. Cinnamon lingers in your nose, coconut on your tongue, the warmth of the food in your belly. The voices around you blend into a lullaby of clinks and sighs. You smile, realizing the truth. You've stumbled into a history lesson disguised as dinner, and it's the most delicious bedtime story you've ever tasted. You rise slowly from the mat, brushing rice grains from your lap, and wander down another lane. This one feels different, quieter, softer, marked not by the smoke of kitchens, but by the shimmer of jewelry catching lamplight. You pass doorways where women sit weaving, their fingers flicking silver threads into bangles or twisting palm fronds into mats. The air is perfumed faintly with coconut oil, and somewhere, laughter bubbles through a courtyard wall like water escaping stone. Mainstream fact: coastal Swahili women played crucial roles in household management and property. Inheritance often passed through maternal lines, giving women unusual leverage compared to many contemporaneous societies. You smile, because as you watch a woman effortlessly haggle with a cloth merchant, her hands heavy with rings. You can tell she hardly needs a historian to confirm her authority. She notices you and gestures toward her earrings, wide silver hoops hammered thin, then shakes her head in mock disapproval of your plain ears. You laugh softly, imagining yourself weighed down by jewelry so heavy you'd tilt sideways in a strong wind. A quirky tidbit. Travelers once wrote that some women here used coconut oil, not only for hair, but as a sort of sunscreen. You can picture it now, glossy, fragrant, practical, though perhaps a bit slippery if you lean against a wall. As you continue, you glimpse through another doorway. Inside, women sit around a low table, weaving baskets while teasing one another. One giggles so loudly she drops her reed, and the others scold her between chuckles. A baby babbles from a sling, bouncing gently with each movement of its mother's knee. The scene is so domestic, so ordinary, yet so enduring you feel as though you've stumbled into a timeless rhythm. Historians still argue whether daily life in these towns leaned more toward seclusion for women, or whether this sociability was common, but the echoes of laughter tell their own story. Farther along, you find a courtyard where clotheslines stretch like banners. Brightly dyed fabrics flutter reds, yellows, indigos, casting patches of colour onto the coral walls. A girl hangs another garment, then pauses to grin at you. She whispers something to her sister, and both laugh before darting back inside. You suspect you've been the punchline, but it doesn't bother you. Being part of someone's fleeting joke feels like inclusion, not mockery. At a corner, you meet a woman grinding spices with such determination you'd think she was punishing the mortar. The air around her is an invisible storm of cloves and pepper. She looks up, offers you a pinch to smell, and your nose tingles so sharply you sneeze. She laughs, clapping her hands, delighted with her accidental prank. You bow theatrically, admitting defeat, and she returns to her work humming contentedly. Beyond, you pass another doorway. Inside, two women sing softly, their voices winding together like twin threads on a loop. The melody is old, rising, and falling in a language you don't fully understand, but the warmth of it seeps into you anyway. You lean against the coral frame, eyes half closed, letting the song carry you like a tide. Then a new sound bracelet's clinking. A woman steps past, her wrists jangling as though she carries her own percussion section. She adjusts her veil, offers you the briefest smile, then vanishes around a corner. The music of her jewelry lingers, soft and mesmerizing, until even the crickets seem to echo it. You pause here, halfway between courtyards and alleys, realizing that what you've seen tonight is more than ornament or domestic chatter. It is power expressed quietly, threaded through silver, laughter, and inheritance. These women, with their bangles and songs, are the keepers of continuity, ensuring the coral town is not just stone and trade but a home, pulsing with life. And as you walk on, the bracelets still jingling faintly in your imagination, you feel wrapped in that domestic music, as though their laughter has become your lullaby, guiding you gently towards sleep. You leave the women's laughter trailing behind you and turn into another lane, where the sound is lighter, higher pitched, scattered, and full of squeals. You've stumbled into a patch of play. The alley opens into a sandy space between coral walls, and there, in the pale moonlight, children dart back and forth like minnows in a shallow tide pool. Their game is simple. A circle of kids crouch, tossing smooth pebbles into the air, catching them on the back of their hands, then flicking them up again with wild accuracy. One boy drops his stone, and the others laugh, not cruelly but with the contagious giggles only children manage. He puffs his cheeks, picks it up, and declares dramatically that the pebble slipped on purpose. You grin clearly. Excuses for losing haven't evolved much in 1,000 years. Mainstream fact: archaeological finds at Gedi and other Swahili sites include tiny carved toys, miniature animals, and clay beads that suggest children had their own parallel economy of fun. You spot a girl cradling a clay cow with horns bigger than its body, her treasure for the evening. She waves it at a younger sibling, who toddles after her, shrieking with delight. One quirky tidbit you've heard: some coastal children supposedly smeared their feet with a paste of ash and oil to stick better when climbing trees. You watch as two boys scramble up a leaning palm to fetch coconuts. They move so quickly it feels like watching geckos in competition. No paste visible, but maybe the secret is just being fearless. You, on the other hand, glance up at the height and decide firmly that your role in this game is audience, not participant. You wander closer. A group is playing chase through the alleys, weaving so fast you're sure they'll collide with a donkey cart, but somehow they dodge at the last second, laughter bouncing off coral walls like echoes in a drum. One boy darts behind you, pats your hip as if tagging you in, then vanishes into the dark. You chuckle nervously, nothing like being conscripted into medieval tag. Historians still argue whether children in these towns had structured schooling from early ages, or whether most of their learning came through apprenticeships and home life. Watching them now, you think both could be true. Formal lessons by day, pebble games and tree climbing by moonlight, and maybe the play taught lessons of its own patience, agility, teamwork, even the art of graciously losing a pebble toss. The soundscape here is different. No merchants haggling, no donkeys braying, no ovens sizzling, just shrieks of delight, the thud of running feet, the occasional scolding from a parent leaning out of a doorway. You hear one mother call out, "Not in the well courtyard," and the children scatter obediently for about 5 seconds until curiosity drags them back. Some things, you realize, are older than coral walls. A little girl waves at you, then solemnly offers a half-eaten roasted banana as if it's the greatest prize she owns. You thank her with a bow, pretending to nibble, and she giggles before sprinting off again, banana forgotten. You're left holding the sticky remains, which a passing cat gladly adopts. Even the animals are in on the games tonight. You sit on a stone ledge, letting the laughter swirl around you. The moonlight glints off the pebbles in flight, turning them into tiny comets. The air vibrates with joy so uncomplicated it makes your chest ache. You realize you don't need to know the rules. The point of the game is the playing itself, the burning energy, the collapse into giggles at the end. Slowly, the children tire. One by one, they flop onto the sand, hair matted with sweat, breath coming in gulps. A mother emerges with a clay jug of water, tilting it carefully into waiting mouths. The younger ones curl against older siblings, drowsy already. Even the pebble tossers set their stones aside, rolling onto their backs to point at constellations above. You lean back too, your head against the coral wall. The cool stone steadies you as the last ripples of laughter fade into yawns. The game dissolves, but its music lingers in your ears, soft, joyful, unpretentious. It feels like the purest lullaby of the night so far. And with that chorus of children drifting into sleep all around you, you can't help but feel yourself drifting too, as though their exhaustion has pulled you into the same tide. The children's laughter drifts into silence as you continue along the coral alleyways, your steps echoing softer now. You notice a building that feels different, quieter, almost reverent. Its doorway is arched, framed by simple carvings, and the air spilling out carries not spices or smoke but the faint smell of ink and parchment. Curiosity tugs at you, and you step inside. This is a library, though not in the sense of towering shelves or dewy decimals. Instead, woven mats line the floor, and on them rest wooden chests and bundles wrapped in cloth. A man sits cross-legged at a low desk, carefully smoothing a page with the back of his hand before dipping his reed pen into ink. The scratch of nib against paper is so steady it feels like a heartbeat for the room. Mainstream fact: Swahili towns were renowned for scholarship. Manuscripts in Arabic and Swahili were copied here, works of religion, law, poetry, and history. These texts connected the coast to broader intellectual worlds stretching across Arabia and Persia. You kneel closer, peering at the looping script. Even if you can't read it fluently, the elegance of the calligraphy itself is soothing, like waves drawn into ink. A quirky tidbit: some manuscripts were scented with clove oil to deter insects. You imagine opening a book and being hit not with musty paper, but with a spicy perfume. Honestly, if modern textbooks smelled like cloves, maybe more people would have enjoyed algebra. You smile at the thought of exam halls scented like a spice bazaar. The scribe glances up at you, his eyes tired but kind, then goes back to his work. His lamp throws golden light onto the parchment, highlighting tiny flourishes. Behind him, shelves carved into coral walls hold rolled scrolls and bound volumes. You can just make out titles scratched in neat lines. Historians still argue whether many of these texts were original works of local scholars or imported and recopied from abroad. Either way, the quiet dedication of the scribe tells you that knowledge here was not a casual ornament but a lifeline. You notice a boy in the corner chanting softly, reciting from memory. His voice wavers but persists, and an older man corrects him gently, tapping a line of script with his finger. You realize this is both school and sanctuary, where learning flows alongside prayer. You crouch beside a chest, lifting its lid carefully. Inside are folded papers edged with faint blue ink. The letters dance across the page, some verses of poetry, others fragments of contracts. You trace a line that seems to mention ivory, then another that praises the moon. The coexistence of trade and beauty on the same page makes you grin practicality and poetry sleeping side by side. From outside, you hear the faint sound of the sea, muffled now by walls thick with history. The combination waves and words feels like the heartbeat of the town. You imagine sailors returning with new texts tucked between bales of cloth, knowledge traded like any other cargo, then copied here in the stillness of the night. The scribe shifts, rubbing his wrist, muttering something about the stubbornness of reed pens. He dips again, scratches another line, and sighs. You chuckle quietly, because some things about writing never change. The ink always runs out too soon. In one corner, a low shelf holds smaller volumes bound in leather. You flip one open and find margin notes in a different hand, maybe a student scribbling observations. The handwriting wobbles, and one line trails into what looks suspiciously like a doodle of a fish. You grin, realizing that even in sacred manuscripts, boredom sometimes won. Historians still debate how widely literacy spread in these towns. Was it confined to elites, or did merchants, sailors, and women read as well? You think of the laughter and jewelry of the women earlier, the pebble games of children, and wonder how many of them might have held these same pages. The lamp flickers, shadows lengthen, and the room feels heavier, like a cloak settling around your shoulders. You close the book gently, set it back on its shelf, and bow your head in respect. The library is not vast, but it breathes with the devotion of those who kept words alive in a world of shifting tides. As you step outside, the night air feels cooler, the stars brighter. You carry with you the scent of clove oil, the scratch of pen against parchment, and the knowledge that even in a bustling coral town, some of the deepest currents flowed not through harbours but through ink. And that realization, soft as it is, folds into your chest like a whispered lullaby. You leave the hush of ink and parchment behind, stepping into air that feels lighter, tinged with the scent of earth and leaves. The alleys lead you into a courtyard. You hadn't expected, a pocket of green hidden behind high coral walls. Here, the city pauses. The sound of markets and mosques has faded, replaced by the whisper of fronds and the occasional drip of water. Palm trees stretch overhead, their fronds fanning out like slow dancers. Beneath them, mango trees spread their shade, their branches heavy with fruit that looks impossibly golden in the moonlight. You walk slowly, dragging your fingers along a low wall, rough coral softened with moss. Somewhere, a cricket sings, joined by the chirp of a night bird. The whole garden feels like it's exhaling just for you. Mainstream fact: many Swahili houses had inner courtyards, often with wells or cisterns to catch rainwater. These spaces provided not only relief from the heat, but also privacy and quiet away from the streets. You approach one such well now, its circular mouth lined with coral stone, rope dangling lazily into its depths. You tug gently on the rope, hear the splash below, and imagine families drawing bucket after bucket to keep the house alive. A quirky tidbit drifts back into your mind. Travellers once wrote that people along this coast sometimes perfumed their letters with crushed blossoms, cloves, jasmine, even mango flowers from gardens like this. You smile at the thought of opening correspondence and being hit not only with words but with a gentle wave of fragrance. Text messaging could definitely take a note from that. You step into a shaded corner where someone has planted herbs, mint, basil, and something sharp that makes your nose twitch. The leaves glisten with dew, and when you brush your hand across them, the scent explodes, fresh, green, alive. A cat darts out from the bushes, tail high, clearly convinced you've intruded into its kingdom. In the center of the courtyard, a bench of carved wood waits, smooth from years of use. You sit, sinking into its coolness, and tilt your head back to stare at the sky. From here, framed by the branches, the stars look caught, trapped in a net of leaves. You imagine someone centuries ago sitting in this very spot, perhaps a merchant resting after a long voyage, or a child memorizing constellations to steer by later in life. Historians still argue whether these gardens were primarily utilitarian water sources, food plots, or whether they were also intended as places of reflection and leisure. Judging by the serenity pressing against your eyelids, you lean toward leisure. A breeze stirs the mango trees, and one fruit thuds softly to the ground. You pick it up, warm from the air, its skin smooth and freckled. You imagine peeling it slowly, juice running down your hands, sweet and sticky. In the distance, you hear faint laughter. The town is still awake, but here in the garden, time itself seems to nap. Another sound interrupts the quiet, the burble of water spilling from a small spout into a basin. The fountain is crude by modern standards, a channel cut from coral to guide runoff, but the effect is hypnotic. The water's rhythm matches your breathing, slow and steady, pulling you deeper into calm. You notice carvings on the garden wall, tiny geometric scratches, almost hidden under creeping vines. Perhaps someone once etched verses or names into the coral, or maybe they're just idle marks left by hands that needed to leave proof of being. Either way, you trace them with your fingertips, finding the grooves cool and strangely comforting. The longer you sit, the heavier your body feels, not with weariness but with ease, as though the garden itself is a quilt tucking you in. You realize that this hidden green space is more than architecture. It's an embrace, a place where the chaos of trade and the sea's unpredictability give way to stillness. And so you close your eyes for a moment, listening to the drip of the fountain, the sigh of the trees, the distant hum of a town still awake. The hidden garden holds you gently, like a pause in a story, like the deep breath before a dream. You leave the shaded garden reluctantly, your skin still tingling with the scent of mint, and step back into the streets. This time, the quiet doesn't last. Voices drift toward you, foreign, lilting, rising, and falling in rhythms that don't quite match the Swahili cadence you've been hearing all night. You follow the sound until you find yourself at the edge of a courtyard where merchants have gathered, their cloaks and robes as varied as their accents. A Persian trader gestures grandly with a piece of porcelain, blue and white, catching the lantern light. He insists it's worth more than any pile of ivory, though the man opposite him, a local with rings on every finger, arches an eyebrow, and replies in measured Swahili that ivory lasts longer than clay. The two laugh, sip from their cups, and continue the debate. Mainstream fact: porcelain from China was a prized import along this coast, often embedded in the very walls of homes as status symbols. You glance at the plate again, imagining it hanging like a star on coral plaster. Nearby, an older man with a salt-stiff beard speaks Portuguese, his words heavy with unfamiliar vowels. He waves a bottle filled with something dark and potent, claiming it's finer than palm wine. A group of listeners chuckle, skeptical, but lean in anyway. You suppress a smile. Every market, every century, has someone selling questionable liquor. A quirky tidbit emerges in the chatter. One sailor boasts that he once traded a live parrot for a bolt of silk. His companions roar with laughter, teasing him that the bird probably knew more languages than he did. The parrot, apparently, cursed in 3 dialects before flying off with a fisherman's lunch. You chuckle softly, picturing the feathered polyglot causing chaos. You wander among the groups, catching fragments of languages: Arabic, Gujarati, Kiswahili, even faint murmurs of Malay. Historians still argue about the exact extent of Southeast Asian influence along the coast, but the snippets you hear tonight make it clear this harbour was never provincial. It was a crossroads, a chorus of the world. At one corner, 2 men unfurl a map, its parchment curling stubbornly in the humid air. They jab fingers at ports: Aden, Calicut, Malindi, arguing over distances and wind patterns. A younger sailor interrupts, insisting he's seen a new kind of star in the southern sky, one that promises a quicker route. The others roll their eyes. You grin. Astrological debates sound oddly familiar, like friends today arguing over whether GPS or intuition is better for navigation. A Chinese trader sits quietly nearby, fanning himself with a lacquered panel. His wares silk so light it shimmers like mist. Glazed bowls painted with cranes speak louder than his words. A child sneaks closer, wide-eyed, until his mother yanks him back gently, whispering that such things are too fine for grubby hands. The trader smiles anyway, perhaps amused, perhaps remembering his own childhood curiosity. The smells in this courtyard are dizzying. Frankincense burning in one corner, frying fish sizzling in another, and the unmistakable musk of camels somewhere just outside the walls. The combination makes your head spin, but not unpleasantly. It feels like standing inside a recipe for the Indian Ocean world. One man leans back against the wall, telling a story in dramatic tones. He swears he saw a whale the size of a palace near Socotra, and that it sneezed so loudly it overturned a boat. His listeners groan in disbelief, but you can't help laughing. Maybe the whale didn't sneeze, but the way he tells it, you almost want to believe. The debates soften as the night deepens. Men exchange beads, weigh out spices, and sign contracts with reed pens. The Portuguese man pours his dubious liquor into small cups, and laughter erupts when someone sputters at the taste. A Persian trader unrolls a rug so fine it silences the group for a moment, the patterns hypnotic. Then the haggling resumes, voices rising like waves. You step back, leaning against a coral wall, letting the languages wash over you. You don't need to catch every word. The music of it is enough. The courtyard feels alive with the push and pull of worlds colliding, bargaining, laughing, exaggerating. It is noisy, yes, but it's a noise that soothes, like the surf, a reminder that the world is vast, and yet somehow, here, all of it has come together in one small, coral stone town. The night deepens, yet instead of quieting, the town seems to discover another layer of life. You drift from the courtyard of merchants into a street where lanterns glow softer, as though the flames themselves have grown sleepy. And then you hear it notes plucked on strings, warm and round, weaving through the coral alleys like silver threads. You follow the sound to an open square. Men and women sit on woven mats, and at the center, a musician cradles an oud, its pear-shaped body gleaming. His fingers move slowly at first, teasing out melodies that rise and fall like waves lapping ashore. The crowd sways gently, murmuring along to words you don't know but somehow feel you've always understood. Mainstream fact: music along the Swahili coast blended African rhythms with Arab and Persian instruments like the oud and kanun. These performances weren't rare, they were part of festivals, weddings, even casual gatherings like this one. Tonight feels like one of those casual yet sacred moments, where history hides in song. The musician's voice joins the strings, low and rich, telling a tale of a sailor who left in the monsoon and returned with nothing but stories. His audience chuckles knowingly, some nodding, as though each of them has known a sailor like that, long on tales, short on cargo. A quirky tidbit: some travelers noted that in these towns, song contests occasionally erupted, where poets improvised verses to outwit each other. You imagine two musicians locked in lyrical combat, the crowd erupting with each clever jab. Maybe tonight's performer has that spark in him, you see, the twinkle in his eye as he elongates a note, waiting for someone to challenge him. No one dares. Children curl in their mothers' laps, drifting off as the oud hums. Young men lean against walls, pretending not to listen too closely but tapping their feet anyway. Even a cat sprawled across the mat flicks its tail in rhythm, the universal mark of approval. Historians still argue how much of this music was performed for entertainment versus ritual. Was it purely for joy, or did it carry hidden codes of devotion and memory? Watching the way the crowd listens, half lulled, half laughing, you suspect it was always both. A prayer, a party, a lullaby, all in one. The music shifts. Another player steps forward with a drum, its skin tight and sharp. He taps it gently, then louder, then folds his rhythm under the oud's melody. The square becomes alive with beats and notes, the air vibrating like the surface of the sea. You feel it in your chest, a second heartbeat syncing with your own. One man begins to sing verses in Swahili, his his words like honey, rolling smooth. Though you don't understand every line, you catch phrases. Moonlight, ocean, longing. The audience sighs as if they've tasted something sweet. The oud player grins and strums harder, building the song until even you want to hum along. The night wraps itself around the music. Stars above blink in time, or maybe you only imagine it. The lanterns flicker, casting shadows that sway like dancers. Someone claps softly, others join, and soon the whole square is breathing to the same rhythm. When the song winds down, it doesn't stop abruptly. It fades, like the tide slipping back into the sea. The oud's last note hangs, suspended, then dissolves. For a moment, silence reigns, heavy and profound. Then applause bursts, not loud or frantic, but warm, like hands rubbing together against the night chill. The musician bows, smiling shyly, as if he didn't just captivate an entire town. You chuckle, because he knows he did. The crowd disperses slowly, reluctant to let go of the spell. Couples walk arm in arm, children carried sleepily, cats stretching as though they were the true stars of the performance. You stay behind a moment longer, sitting cross-legged on the mat, letting the echo of the oud hum through your bones. It feels less like entertainment and more like medicine, something stitched into you quietly, making you softer, calmer, more ready to drift. And when you finally rise and leave the square, the melody follows you into the shadows, a lullaby carried on the night breeze. You drift down a lane that curves away from the music square. The night air is still heavy with oud notes, but another sound takes over now. Voices hushed, speaking of things just beyond the edge of reason. A small group gathers near a shrine carved into coral, its surface marked with shells, beads, and scraps of cloth. Lanterns flicker low, and the air smells faintly of seawater and ash. One man whispers of mystical sea spirits, creatures that live beneath the waves, luring fishermen with songs. He claims his uncle once heard them singing on a windless night and refused to set sail for days. A woman beside him clutches a necklace strung with cowries and nods. Mainstream fact. Swahili coastal belief often blended Islam with older African traditions, producing a rich tapestry where saints, spirits, and ancestors all brush shoulders in daily life. Someone shows you a tiny pouch tied at the waist, an amulet filled with herbs, maybe hair, maybe something stranger, a quirky tidbit. Some amulets were reportedly stuffed with powdered crocodile dung to ward off bad luck at sea. You blink. You'd like to think the crocodiles donated willingly, though probably not. You stifle a laugh, imagining medieval sailors comparing lucky charms like baseball cards. Historians still argue how widespread these practices were. Were they private superstitions of sailors, or an accepted part of community ritual? Either way, you see the seriousness in the listeners' faces. To them, charms and whispers are as important as sails and compasses. The conversation shifts. Someone speaks of a ghost said to haunt the ruins of an older mosque, her footsteps heard on moonless nights. A boy gasps, covering his mouth. An elder chuckles gently, assuring him that ghosts only bother those who forget to say their prayers. The boy relaxes, though his eyes still dart nervously toward the shadows. The shrine itself glows faintly in lantern light. You step closer, noticing coral etched with patterns that might be prayers, might be idle doodles. A bowl holds water, reflecting the stars. You see your face in it, distorted, as though some spirit is peering back. You shiver not from fear, but from the uncanny sense of standing between worlds, one foot in the market, one in the unseen. The group begins a soft chant, not loud, not insistent, just a low hum. It rises and falls, mingling with the ocean's sigh. You lean against the coral wall, listening. The chant doesn't frighten, it steadies, like a lullaby written in a key you've never learned but somehow recognize. And as you close your eyes, the charms, the whispers, the ghost stories, all of them fold into one truth. In these coral stone towns, the boundary between the tangible and the mysterious was always porous, just like the coral itself, full of tiny holes, breathing secrets into the night. You drift from the shrine, the echo of chant still humming in your chest, and the streets begin to feel emptier. Where once voices overlapped in song, trade, and laughter, now there is only the shuffle of your own footsteps, and the sigh of the ocean pressing against the shore. The coral walls, once alive with doors swinging and children darting, lean silently, their carvings softened by centuries of salt and rain. Mainstream fact: many Swahili towns, once thriving centers of commerce, declined as Portuguese expansion and shifting trade routes drew ships elsewhere. Kilwa, once the jewel of the coast, lost its dominance when the Portuguese seized its harbour in the early 1500s. You trace your fingers along a wall here, knowing it once held the weight of wealth and prestige, now only crumbling coral. The silence is not lifeless, though. It carries a strange intimacy, like entering a house after everyone has left, where the air still remembers the warmth of voices. You walk past a collapsed archway, its stones scattered like teeth. A quirky tidbit: some ruins on the coast became convenient goat pens for later villagers, the grand halls of sultans repurposed as livestock shelters. You chuckle softly, imagining a goat chewing grass on a coral throne, unconcerned with history's grandeur. You pause before an abandoned courtyard. Vines creep up its walls, strangling the carved doorframe. A well sits in the center, filled not with water but with shadows. You peer inside and see only your reflection, wavering. Historians still argue whether these towns were abandoned suddenly under external pressure, or whether their decline was gradual, the slow ebb of tides pulling people away. The walls won't answer, they only lean inward, listening. Further on, you find what was once a mosque. Its mihrab still points east, but the roof has caved, and moonlight pours in freely. A fig tree has rooted in the cracks, its branches rising where prayers once did. You step carefully across broken plaster, imagining the last congregation voices lifted, unaware they were singing the final notes. The harbour, too, feels altered. No longer brimming with sails and laughter, only a few battered boats creak in the tide. The dock timbers sag, barnacled and tired. The sea itself whispers as though consoling the ruins, its waves stroking the coral piers with infinite patience. You walk through another street, noticing doors hanging crooked, their brass studs tarnished. The once bright indigo fabrics are gone, only scraps of cloth caught in thorns. The air smells of earth reclaiming space, a mixture of damp coral and growing moss. A cat darts out of a doorway, startled, then disappears into the shadows. Even the cats seem fewer here, yet the emptiness does not feel hostile. It feels like rest. These coral stone towns, after centuries of bustle, finally closed their eyes. You tread softly, unwilling to disturb them. A breeze kicks up sand, carrying with it fragments of sound perhaps only your imagination. The faint call of merchants, the pluck of an oud, the laughter of children. You pause, smile sadly, and whisper thanks to the ghosts of a place that once held the world in its palm. And as you move on, you carry their silence with you, a reminder that history does not end, it lingers, softened, like coral itself dissolving back into the sea. You wander beyond the ruined streets, where coral walls have collapsed into heaps, and the ground crunches with shells and broken plaster. The town thins into shoreline, and at last the horizon opens. The moon hangs low, its light stretching a silver path across the Indian Ocean. Waves roll gently onto the sand, each one arriving like a long exhale. You sit down, your legs folding easily, as though the earth has been expecting you. Here, there is no bustle, no haggling, no music, only the eternal dialogue between sea and shore. Mainstream fact: the Swahili coast stretched for over 1,500 miles, from Mogadishu down to Sofala, dotted with towns like the one you've wandered tonight. Each had its moment of prosperity, and each, in its own time, gave way to silence. You look out at the ocean and realize that the waves themselves are the only citizens who never leave. A quirky tidbit whispers to you: some sailors believed the sea at night was filled with glowing spirits, and they took bioluminescent plankton as proof. You watch as the surf foams faintly blue, tiny sparks lighting the water. Spirits or science, the effect is magical enough to make you doubt your own skepticism. You laugh softly. No wonder sailors told such stories. You'd probably make something up too if your ocean glowed like fairy dust. Historians still argue whether these coral stone towns were abandoned because of European dominance, internal decline, or shifting climate. But here, sitting on sand that feels soft as powdered coral, those debates feel small. The ruins do not argue, they rest. You lean back, lying flat against the ground. Stars scatter across the sky, sharp and endless, mirrored by the phosphorescent shimmer in the waves. Between them, you feel cradled, as though the entire world has become one vast lullaby. The surf hushes, the night sighs, and your breath falls into rhythm with them. Slower, softer. The wind down begins. The pacing softens, words stretch longer, like waves lengthening as they reach the shore. The ruins you left behind dissolve into shadows, their weight eased, their silence becoming comfort rather than sorrow. The ocean continues its patient song, waves folding and unfolding, endless, effortless. You picture the coral walls now resting as reefs again, slowly sinking into water, offering shelter to fish and crabs. What once was city is becoming sea again, a cycle so steady you can trust it without thinking. Time moves differently here, not in years or centuries, but in breaths, in tides, in stars slowly wheeling overhead. The night grows thicker, not heavy but protective, like a blanket drawn up to your chin. The air tastes of salt and fruit, of memories and forgetting. The last echoes of markets, prayers, songs, and children's games are all folded into one quiet hum that cradles you now. You let your eyes drift closed. In the dark behind your lids, the ocean still glimmers, lanterns still sway, laughter still trickles through coral alleys, all of it soft, all of it distant, all of it safe. And as the waves keep their rhythm, steady and slow, you feel yourself swaying with them, rocked like a dhow in calm waters, carried out towards sleep. The eternal shore, the endless stars, the breathing ruins they keep watch, so you don't have to. Sweet dreams,